They were 28 seniors, brimming with hope, bound for one final trip before stepping into adulthood. Then they were gone. No phone calls. No bodies. Just silence. For more than 2 decades, the disappearance of the class of 2001 was less a police file than a ghost story, an unsolved mystery whispered in locker rooms and around backyard campfires. Parents clung to fading photos, while the rest of the town learned to live with the ache of never knowing. That is, until a hiker strayed from the trail and saw something impossible through the pines. September 12, 2023. Blackthorn National Forest. Adam Kincaid, a seasoned outdoorsman, had walked these woods 100 times. But on that overcast afternoon, he spotted a dull streak of yellow wedge between the trees. At first, he thought it was scrap metal left by loggers, maybe an old ranger shack. He pushed closer, leaves snagging at his jacket, until the shape came into focus. A bus, or what remained of one. The frame was sunken into the earth, its roof caved, its paint bleached and peeled by years of rain. Moss veiled the windows, ivy knotted through the wheel wells. The number stenciled on its side was barely legible. It should not have been there, miles from any road, deep inside terrain no vehicle could reach. Inside, it looked as though time had been trapped and abandoned. Dusty backpacks were still strapped to torn seats. A cassette player, warped with mildew, lay cracked on the floor. A yearbook, swollen with mold, clung shut like a wound refusing to heal. And in the very back, beneath a heap of rotted jackets, something pale gleamed under the weak light of the forest canopy. A bone. Human. When investigators arrived, they didn't need to debate what they were looking at. The bus belonged to the class of 2001 from Blackthorn Valley High, the students who had vanished without explanation on their graduation trip. But as they cataloged the belongings left inside, the case became more chilling, not less. Some items looked untouched, frozen where they had been dropped 22 years ago. Others seemed deliberately arranged, laid out with intention. Pages from the yearbook opened to certain faces, drawings tucked into seat pockets, sketches of faceless figures circling a bus. Whatever had happened on that trip, it hadn't been an accident. May 31st, 2001. Millbrook, Pennsylvania. The town was buzzing with the kind of restless joy that only came at the end of the school year. For most, it was just another start to summer. But for the seniors of Blackthorn Valley High, it was a farewell. One last day before they shed the skin of adolescence and stepped into something bigger, stranger, more uncertain. The school bell rang at noon, and the class of 2001 erupted into cheers, pouring out of the double doors like a tide. Confetti rained from second-story windows. Someone blasted a portable stereo, its muffled pop-punk anthem bouncing across the parking lot. Boys sprinted to their cars, horns blaring, while girls scribbled final signatures in each other's yearbooks. For a moment, it looked like every coming-of-age film ever made, laughter, hugs, and promises to never lose touch. But beneath the noise, there was an undercurrent no one could name. Later, people would describe it as a heaviness, as if the air itself had been warning them. Naomi Vega stood at the steps, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. She was quieter than most, more comfortable in the margins than in the spotlight. Her best friend, Alicia Monroe, tugged at her arm. "Come on," Alicia said, grinning. "It's the last day. You can't just stand there like you're waiting for a funeral." Naomi smiled weakly, but said nothing. In the months that followed, people would remember that look, that small, distracted frown, as though she was already somewhere else. Across the lot, Samuel Ortega leaned against his car, flipping open a journal. He scribbled something before snapping it shut, shoving it deep into his backpack. Samuel was a class skeptic, sharp-witted and restless, always half in and half out of things. But he had his eye on Naomi, not in the way Alicia teased him about, but in a way that suggested he noticed what others didn't, that she seemed burdened by something invisible. Principal Harris gave his farewell speech under the flagpole, his voice breaking at the edges. "You are the class that made us proud," he said. "You are the class that will carry Blackthorn Valley forward." A ripple of applause passed through the crowd. But even as parents snapped pictures and siblings waved signs, Naomi's eyes darted toward the tree line beyond the football field. The forest loomed at the edge of town like a wall. Dense, endless, older than anything Millbrook had built. Most kids grew up hiking its trails, camping near its creeks, telling ghost stories about its shadows. But for Naomi, it wasn't just background. It was something she'd been sketching in the margins of her notebooks for months. The same shapes, the same faceless figures, the same bus, though she hadn't told anyone. By late afternoon, the seniors regrouped at the school gym, tossing luggage into piles and trading rumors about their overnight trip. The graduation tradition had been around for decades. One last outing together before adulthood scattered them. Some classes went to amusement parks, others to the shore. The class of 2001 had voted for an overnight retreat in the forest cabins, organized by the PTA and chaperoned by 2 teachers. Cabins in the woods, muttered Brian Keller, quarterback and unofficial ringleader. Classic horror setup. He grinned at his friends, but his laugh fell a little flat. The bus arrived just before sunset, groaning as it pulled into the lot. It wasn't the regular yellow fleet that ferried students to and from school. This one was older, dented, its paint fading like parchment. The number stenciled on its side was crooked, as though reapplied after being scraped away. Some kids joked about it. Others didn't. Alicia shoved Naomi toward the line. "Come on, we'll sit in the back." Best view. Naomi hesitated, her gaze catching on the rust stains running down the bus's side, like dried blood. She thought, just for a moment, that she saw something move behind the glass of the rear window. A trick of the light, she told herself. Samuel caught her pause and muttered, "Don't like the look of it either." The chaperones, Mr. Douglas and Ms. Reeves, ushered them on board with 4 smiles. Parents lingered, waving as their children climbed inside. Camcorders whirred, capturing shaky footage of kids laughing, tossing bags, shouting promises to party all night. No one knew it would be the last recording of them alive. The bus doors hissed shut. The engine groaned. And as it rolled away from Blackthorn Valley High into the stretching shadows of Blackthorn National Forest, Millbrook waved and cheered. Hours later, the town would never see them again. The bus rumbled deeper into the forest, its headlights cutting through the dense canopy like knives. Inside, laughter bounced off the yellowed walls, punctuated by the occasional groan of the engine. The scent of damp upholstery and leftover cafeteria pizza clung to the air, but no one seemed to notice. Not yet. Naomi sat near the back, knees pulled to her chest, sketchbook balanced precariously on her lap. She drew absently, her charcoal scratching faint, deliberate lines onto the page. Figures moved between the seats as shadows, faces indistinct. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from cold, but from something she couldn't yet name. Alicia nudged her. "Stop staring at the walls like they're going to eat you. It's a bus ride, not a haunted house." Naomi smiled, tight-lipped. "I'm fine." But she wasn't. Brian Keller, sprawled across 3 seats up front, flicked open a camcorder, aiming it toward the laughing students. "This is going on my tape," he said, eyes bright with mischief. "The last night of freedom. Folks, say something ridiculous." Voices shouted, cameras shook, and the bus rocked with energy. Samuel Ortega leaned against the window, quiet, scanning the passing blur of trees. He had a bad feeling. Not fear exactly, but a prickling awareness. The forest outside seemed too still, almost watching. The shadows moved differently than they should. Laughter shifted subtly as the road narrowed. The bus groaned over roots and rocks, tires crunching against loose gravel. The chaperones, Mr. Douglas and Ms. Reeves, exchanged glances. Both tried to smile, but tension tugged at their faces. "Almost there, kids," Mr. Douglas said. His voice held a brittle edge that went unnoticed among the teasing and chatter. The sun dipped below the trees, leaving behind a slate-gray sky. Darkness settled into the forest like a living thing. Naomi's sketchbook fell from her lap with a soft thump. She picked it up, flipping to the page she'd been working on. A rough sketch of the bus emerged, windows blacked out, surrounded by tall, faceless shapes. She blinked, shaking her head. "It's just a drawing," she whispered to herself. "Nothing real." But the shapes seemed to linger in the shadows of the bus, stretching along the walls with the motion of the ride. Down the aisle, Jared Fields, camera dangling from his neck, leaned toward Emily Tran. "Hey, you gonna document this too?" he asked, voice low. Emily nodded silently, eyes glued to the passing trees. She hadn't spoken much on the ride. Never had. But now she fiddled with a sketch pad peeking from her backpack. Her drawings were different, darker, almost frantic, but she kept them to herself. Tyrese Hall sat near the front, headphones in, pretending not to notice the forest pressing against the windows. His fist twitched slightly. He hated being away from the familiar lights of the town, the roads that made sense, the predictable hum of life. He wasn't usually superstitious, but tonight, even he couldn't shake the sensation of eyes in the dark. Half an hour in, the bus hit a stretch of narrow, winding trail, barely wide enough for the tires. Gravel crunched beneath them, the road slick from a morning shower. A sudden dip sent backpacks sliding from seats, rattling like bones. Naomi gasped. Alicia laughed nervously, riding her bag. But the laughter fell hollow, swallowed almost immediately by the thickening night. Outside, the trees closed in. Branches scraped the roof. The road disappeared into shadows so deep they seemed to absorb the headlights, leaving the bus floating in an empty void. The chatter inside waned. Samuel leaned forward, gripping the seat in front of him. Doesn't anyone else feel watched? The bus lurched. Something banged against the side, metal or wood. The engine sputtered. Mr. Douglas muttered under his breath. Checking the dashboard. Nothing. The tires hummed steadily. But the shadows moved again, faster now, flickering against the edges of the bus windows. Naomi's sketchbook trembled in her lap. She tried to close it, but the page fell open to the faceless shapes. She felt, rather than saw, a presence brushing past her shoulder. A whisper? No, just a rustle of trees. Or was it a voice? "Stop it," she murmured to the darkness, gripping the seat. Jared noticed her trembling. He stepped closer. "Hey," he said softly. "It's just the forest. Nothing in here is real. Just a long ride, that's all." But none of them said it aloud. Something wasn't right. The bus was far deeper into the forest than any path should allow. They hadn't passed a mile marker in almost 20 minutes. No cabins, no campground signs, nothing familiar. Only the endless stretch of looming, oppressive trees. Hours seemed to stretch into minutes, and the night became thicker. Shadows pooled in the corners, shifting shapes dancing along the ceiling. Emily's fingers clutched her sketch pad. She doodled quietly, drawing eyes in the dark, faces turning away. She didn't look up. She didn't speak. Tyrese ripped his headphones out. The music wasn't loud enough to drown the silence anymore. He scanned the windows again, heart hammering. Nothing should have been moving, nothing real, but the way the trees leaned, the way the wind shifted, it was wrong. Alicia tried to keep the mood light, telling jokes about the bus breaking down or being haunted. But even her laughter faltered when the bus hit a sudden hollow in the road, the suspension jerking violently. A thump echoed from the back. Naomi nearly dropped her sketchbook again. "Everything okay back there?" Mr. Douglas called, forcing calm into his voice. There was a pause. Then another thump. The bus slowed. The engine sputtered again, lights flickering. Naomi's eyes widened. Something was moving outside the windows. Something tall, standing between the trees, blocking the headlights for a heartbeat too long. She blinked. When she looked again, it was gone. The seniors, none of them fully aware yet, had crossed an invisible threshold. The forest wasn't just around them anymore. It was inside them. And the last night of freedom was only beginning. The bus finally rolled to a stop, tires crunching over loose gravel that gave way to the shadows of towering evergreens. The headlights dimmed against the dense canopy, leaving the interior in near darkness. The forest seemed to exhale, a slow, damp breath that drifted through the broken windows. "Here we are," Mr. Douglas called, though his voice lacked its usual authority. He and Ms. Reeves moved to open the doors, their hands lingering on the handles as if expecting resistance. The kids shuffled forward, excitement and unease mingling in equal measure. Naomi's eyes darted to the tree lean. The forest seemed older than anything she'd ever seen. Branches twisted at impossible angles, shadows pooling beneath roots and rocks like black water. The smell of moss and wet earth was overpowering, almost clinging to their skin. She shivered, tugging her jacket closer. Alicia nudged her. "Come on, it's just a weekend in the woods. Don't be a drama queen." Naomi nodded, but her gaze lingered on a hollow between two oaks. Something moved in the shadows, fast, fleeting, almost imperceptible, but enough to make her heart hitch. Samuel Ortega stepped down first, surveying the area with meticulous scrutiny. The cabins were rustic, more like old logging shacks and vacation lodges. Some had moss creeping along the roof, windows streaked with grime. The trail that led deeper into the forest looked overgrown, narrow, and curving away into darkness. There were no signs, no clear markers, no paths wide enough for vehicles beyond the bus. "This place isn't on the map," Samuel muttered. "I checked." Brian Keller laughed. "Perfect horror movie material. Then, who's scared?" He swaggered past the others, hands in his pockets, projecting confidence he didn't entirely feel. Emily Tran followed quietly, her sketch pad peeking from her backpack. She had been drawing during the bus ride. Frantic, abstract figures she refused to show anyone. Now, she paused at the edge of the small clearing, sensing something unnameable. Her pencil traced lines in the air before committing them to the page, a subconscious ritual. The seniors unloaded their bags, tossing them toward the cabins. Naomi's heart thudded against her ribcage. Every step she took on the soft forest floor seemed to echo unnaturally. The air was heavier than she expected, thick with moisture and something else, something metallic, almost like blood, lingering faintly. The chaperones rounded up the group, herding them toward the main cabin. "All right, settle in, unpack, and then we'll have dinner," Ms. Reeves said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Dinner was quiet at first. Sandwiches, fruit, and bottled water were laid out on the rough-hewn table. Students laughed nervously, trading jokes to mask the unease. But Naomi noticed subtle cues no one else did, a low hum in the trees, as if the forest itself was vibrating, and the shadows cast by the lantern seemed to linger longer than physics should allow. Brian tried to keep the energy alive. "So, tonight we campfire. Stories. Ghosts. The usual." He winked at Alicia, who smiled weakly, sensing his effort to maintain normalcy. By the time the fire was lit, the sun had fully set, leaving the forest cloaked in ink. Sparks rose, dancing into the treetops, mingling with the rising fog. Naomi sketched furiously now, unable to stop herself. She drew figures in the mist, tall, faceless, surrounding the fire. "Naomi, what are you drawing?" Alicia asked, peering over her shoulder. "Nothing," Naomi muttered, closing the sketch pad too quickly. Her hands shook, but the forest was listening. The first real unease came with the sounds, low, guttural, almost animal, but human in rhythm. Whispers rode the wind, so faint at first that only Naomi and Samuel seemed to hear them. Brian and the others dismissed it as an echo of the fire or the wind. Emily's eyes widened, pencil clutched like a talisman. Then came the footprints. Not animal, not human entirely. Too large, too deep, and curving in strange patterns around the clearing. Samuel froze, tracing them with his foot. "These aren't ours. And they didn't come from a road." No one had noticed them before, yet they were everywhere, encircling the cabins, leading deeper into the blackened forest. "Probably local hunters," Brian said, forcing laughter. But even he glanced at the dark tree line nervously. As the night deepened, the students were corralled into their cabins. Naomi's small group huddled together, whispering about the noises and the footprints. Samuel suggested barricading the doors with logs, which was met with scoffs, but the unease lingered. Emily's sketches became frantic, depicting faceless figures holding hands in a circle around a blazing fire. Figures that seemed to mimic the shadows cast by the real flames outside. By midnight, the forest had claimed its own rules. The wind carried voices, the trees creaked in unnatural rhythms, and the fire sputtered against an unseen force. Naomi could feel eyes upon her from the darkness beyond the cabin walls, the shadows stretching and writhing just beyond reach. Somewhere between sleep and wakefulness, a whisper echoed in her mind. You are not meant to leave. And with that, the last night of innocence truly began. The night stretched long and oppressive. Within the cabins, whispers of movement snaked between the walls, shadows sliding along the corners like liquid ink. Naomi lay awake, pencil clutched loosely in her hand, tracing lines in the air, imagining the shapes her sketches might take if they were real. She didn't dare look at the forest outside. She didn't want to see the faceless silhouettes she felt pressing in. By early morning, a thick fog had rolled into the clearing, curling around the cabins in ghostly fingers. Breakfast was silent, the earlier laughter replaced by uneasy glances. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a branch drew the group's attention. Even Brian's usual bravado had dissolved. His camcorder now swung loosely from his neck, capturing nothing but the gray haze and trembling hands. Samuel Ortega stepped outside, boots crunching softly against the damp undergrowth. "We need to get our bearings," he said, voice low. "The map I printed, it doesn't match anything here. This forest, it's wrong." Emily followed quietly, sketchpad tucked under arm. "It's like the trees are moving," she whispered, barely audible. "Like they're alive." Tyrese scoffed, but even he hesitated at the edge of the fog. There was something in the air that made every heartbeat feel heavier, every step feel calculated. Naomi stayed close to Emily, her hand brushing against the sketch pad, trying to ground herself in something tangible. Their plan had been simple, a short hike to the river, then back by noon. But the path twisted unexpectedly, narrowing until it seemed to vanish. 1 minute, a trail of worn dirt and fallen leaves. The next, just the roots and moss of the forest floor, twisting into shapes that didn't belong. "Guys," Samuel called, pausing. He knelt to inspect the ground. The footprints. They're back. Not theirs. Not even human. Large, uneven, claw-like, circling the path in patterns that made no sense. Naomi's stomach clenched. Emily's hand shook as she flipped open her sketch pad, tracing the shapes. Figures around a fire. Faceless again, elongated limbs stretching into the mist. "Maybe it's animals," Brian said weakly, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. They walked on, the fog thickening, pressing in. The air carried whispers, low and guttural, seeming to echo from every direction at once. Naomi froze. She thought she saw a figure slip behind a tree, a tall, shadowed shape without a face. When she blinked, nothing remained but mist curling lazily in the morning sun. The forest seemed to have rules they didn't understand. Trails looped impossibly, returning them to the same clearing despite hours of walking. The cabins, once clearly behind them, now loomed faintly through the fog, but always at a different angle, farther than before. Panic began its slow seep into the group. Tyrese's confidence broke first. "We're walking in circles," he muttered, voice tight. "This isn't natural. Something's wrong." Naomi glanced around, heart hammering. She could feel the eyes again, too many to count, unseen but heavy. Emily's sketches now depicted the forest as alive. Trees leaning over figures, shadows coiling around people like snakes. She drew frantically, refusing to speak, as if the act itself kept her safe. By afternoon, they reached a small clearing, a circle of stones blackened at the edges, surrounded by charred remnants of a fire. It was odd, too intentional to be left by wanderers or campers. Symbols had been carved into the stones, angular and jagged, repeating patterns that twisted unnaturally. The student stepped back instinctively. The air colder here. Who would make this? Alicia whispered, voice trembling. No one answered. Then came the first disappearance. A scream, brief, sharp, swallowed immediately by the fog, echoed from the trees. Brian turned to see that Tyrese was gone. 1 second he'd been stepping forward, the next, nothing. The ground where it walked was undisturbed, yet the forest seemed to pulse with some hidden rhythm, drawing the attention of every pair of eyes. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, sketchpad dropping. Naomi grabbed it instinctively, flipping to the page she had just drawn. The faceless figures had grown taller, more defined, and in the center, a shadow where Tyrese should have been. "Tyrese!" Samuel shouted, voice cracking. They ran toward the spot, scanning the dense undergrowth, calling his name. No reply, just a whispering wind carrying unintelligible syllables that set every nerve on edge. The forest swallowed him. Panic erupted. The students stumbled back toward the path they thought led to safety, but it twisted again, fracturing under the weight of unseen rules. Naomi's chest burned with fear, every breath sharp as knives. Emily clutched her sketches, muttering numbers and symbols she didn't understand, her eyes wild. By dusk, they returned to the clearing near the cabins. Exhausted, trembling, they realized that the forest had chosen its own paths. The stones, the fire circle, the symbols, they weren't remnants. They were warnings. Or instructions. Mr. Douglas and Ms. Reeves tried to restore order, herding the students back inside the cabins. But the unease was irreversible. Naomi stayed awake, staring at the mist curling to the window, imagining the faceless figures from her sketches moving in the fog, waiting. That night, as the students drifted fitfully into sleep, Naomi dreamed of tall silhouettes, circling silently, their faces blank, their limbs stretching into impossibilities. One of them reached toward her, hand brushing her hair. She woke screaming, her voice swallowed by the thick, cold air. Outside, the forest breathed, alive, patient, watching, and the first seeds of terror had fully taken root. By the 5th day in Blackthorn Hollow, the forest had claimed its rhythm. Time had begun to blur, sunrise and sunset indistinct, hours slipping by without acknowledgement. The students moved like shadows themselves, exhausted and paranoid, wary of every rustle and crack in the undergrowth. Naomi's hand shook as she clutched her sketch pad, pages filled with jagged figures and spiraling symbols she could barely interpret. Emily followed closely, whispering numbers, symbols, and words that made no sense to anyone but herself. Samuel tried to maintain order, yet the strain etched deep lines into his face. He had begun keeping a running tally of hours, attempting to track time in a place where none seemed to exist. Brian's camera now hung uselessly at his side. He had stopped filming. Even technology seemed powerless here. Every attempt to document or record the forest secrets failed. Batteries drained, devices warped, memory cards corrupted. The group moved cautiously through a narrow pass carved by roots and rocks, following what they hoped was a safe path to water. Then the fog thickened, curling into unnatural shapes. Naomi felt eyes on her, dozens of them, pressing from the edges of visibility. She froze. A shape emerged, tall, slender, faceless, standing impossibly still amidst the mist. "They're watching us," she whispered, voice barely audible. Samuel stepped forward, rationality fighting terror. "It's a person. Someone, maybe a local, a hermit." The figure didn't move, didn't respond. Then another appeared, then another. They formed a line, silently blocking the path. The students could not see faces, only smooth, blank surfaces where human features should have been. Brian swallowed hard. What the hell, what do they want? No answer came, only the sound of the fog moving through branches, whispering unintelligible syllables. Naomi's stomach churned as the first figure extended a hand, or something like a hand, toward them. The air felt thick, heavy, charged with unseen force. Emily's pencil flew across the page, frantically capturing what her eyes couldn't fully comprehend. Faceless figures in robes, reaching, circling, guiding. Suddenly, a low hum began, emanating from the figures themselves. It was rhythmic, almost hypnotic, vibrating through bone and muscle, drawing Naomi, Emily, and Samuel into an unsteady trance. "Don't," Samuel warned, but the sound seemed to wrap around his words, distorting them, making them meaningless. Then they spoke. Not words, at least not in any language known to man. The forest carried their voice in shivers along the spine, in a pressure behind the eyes. The sound translated only in instinct. You belong. You were chosen. Resistance is irrelevant. Naomi turned to Brian and Alicia, who had frozen in horror. Their limbs felt heavy, weighted by something unseen. Panic took root. Emily's sketches began to flutter as if alive, pages snapping in the windless air, revealing images the students had not yet seen. They showed themselves, or what looked like themselves, standing in a ring, faces blank, hands raised toward a flickering, unseen fire. The realization hit. the forest, and these figures had been waiting for them, preparing for them. Alicia screamed as one of the faceless figures moved, unnaturally fast, darting into their midst. It brushed past her, cold and solid, leaving a deep, lasting chill. Brian turned the camera instinctively, but the viewfinder was blank, showing only static, even as he panned directly at the figure. Samuel grabbed Naomi and Emily. Run, run. They sprinted blindly through the mist, branches slapping their faces, roots catching their feet, until the clearing opened onto a space they had never seen before. There, a circle of blackened stones, similar to the one near the cabins, burned faintly with embers that gave off no heat. And then Naomi saw it. A robed figure in the center, taller than any human, faceless, arms extended toward the sky, motionless yet commanding. Around it, dozens of smaller faceless figures waited, circling, swaying in a cadence Naomi could feel in her chest. Emily collapsed to the ground, muttering numbers and symbols. It's the chosen are real. Samuel's rational mind shattered. This isn't a cult, he whispered. It's something else. Something older. Suddenly, the tall figure raised one arm, and the forest seemed to exhale. Trees bent slightly. Shadows pulled unnaturally, and a low, keening sound rose, like wind trapped inside stone. Brian and Alicia screamed as one of the smaller figures approached. Its hand, or appendage, reached toward them, yet they could not move, trapped in place by a weight they could not see. Naomi, shaking, drew a line in the dirt with her finger, a half-formed attempt at protection. The air seemed to recoil from it, like the mark itself pushed against the unnatural presence. And then the figure spoke, or rather, projected a thought directly into their minds. The forest takes only what is offered willingly. Those who resist are claimed. You are late. Naomi felt a pull from the trees, a compulsion stronger than fear, stronger than any desire to flee. She struggled, tearing at the ground with fingers, clawing at roots. Emily and Samuel fought beside her, yet the force tugged at their very essence, whispering, "You were chosen. You are ours." Brian finally broke free of his paralysis and grabbed Alicia, dragging her backward. The smaller figures swarmed around them, silent but suffocating. The tall figure in the center remained, arms raised, faceless, commanding. Naomi's stomach churned. Their breaths came in ragged gasps. But the circle had not broken. They could not escape. For the first time, Naomi realized the forest had been watching all along, preparing, selecting, guiding. And now the students were trapped, pawns in a ritual they barely understood. Then, just as suddenly, the figures vanished. The mist receded. The forest fell silent, and the embers in the stones circled dim to black ash. Naomi gasped, chest heaving. The forest was still. The fog rolled lazily, as though nothing had happened. Yet the weight in the air remained. They were not free. Samuel pulled everyone back toward the cabins, voice low, trembling. "It's real. They're real. And we can't escape." "Not yet," Emily whispered, voice quivering. "And the chosen, they're only beginning." The forest seemed to breathe around them, patient, alive, waiting. And deep in Naomi's mind, the echo of that first whisper lingered. You are not meant to leave. By the sixth night, exhaustion had etched itself into every line of their bodies. The students of Blackthorn Hollow were no longer teenagers. They were shadows of themselves, hollow-eyed and trembling, caught in a place where time had fractured. Every sound was amplified. The snap of a twig, the brush of wind to the pines, even her own ragged breath sounded foreign in the dense darkness. Naomi huddled near a dying campfire, sketchpad clutched to her chest. Her drawings had grown frantic, chaotic, symbols and faces blurring into one another, inked with trembling hands. Emily sat beside her, whispering the sequences of numbers and shapes she had memorized from the first encounter with the faceless figures. The others avoided eye contact, each lost in their private spirals of terror. Samuel, always a reluctant leader, patrolled the perimeter, eyes scanning every shadow, ears straining for the subtle movements of the forest. "We can't stay still," he whispered, voice brittle. "We have to move before they come back." Brian, camera abandoned for the third day, shook his head. "No," he said flatly. We're not moving anywhere. The forest, it's watching every step. It wants us to panic. Alicia's lips quivered. It's like it knows us, she said, voice barely audible. It knows what scares us, what we're thinking. A sudden rustle froze them all. From the mist emerged a figure. Smaller this time, closer. Its robe was tattered, gray, blending seamlessly into the fog, but the absence of a face was unmistakable. It moved deliberately, unhurried, unthreatened by their presence. Naomi's heart slammed. Not again. Please, not again. Samuel took a step forward, defiance in his eyes. Stay back. We're not yours. The figure stopped. Then, slowly, a hand extended, pale, smooth, impossibly long fingers tipped in shadow. A single object rested in its palm, a small, crude wooden token, carved with a symbol Naomi recognized from her sketches. Emily gasped, stumbling backward. It's for one of us, she whispered. Before anyone could react, a chilling sound slithered through the clearing, a low, undulating hum that pressed against their minds. The token glowed faintly in the fog, pulsating with rhythm, resonating in Naomi's chest. The figure did not speak, yet words formed in their heads. Choose willingly, or it will be taken. Panic surged. Brian lunged forward to grab the token, but Samuel restrained him. No, don't touch it. The figure tilted its head. Slowly, deliberately, it raised both arms. From the shadows, dozens more emerged, small, faceless, moving like a silent tide. Naomi, Emily, Samuel, Brian, and Alicia were surrounded. The token's glow brightened. It was as if the forest itself had condensed into that tiny, trembling object. This isn't real, Brian muttered, voice breaking. This can't be. Emily's voice trembled as she repeated the chant-like numbers she had been whispering all night. The figures froze, tilting their heads in unison, reacting to her incantation as if the sequence itself held power. Then came the scream. Alicia, one of the faceless figures, had touched her shoulder. She collapsed to the ground, writhing, screaming, a sound unlike any human scream, raw, deep, resonating with some ancient frequency. Her body convulsed, eyes wide, pupils dilated to black voids. Naomi tried to help, but Samuel held her back. It's not safe. You can't touch her. The figure lifted the token higher. A wave of light, cold and cutting, surged outward. Alicia went rigid. Then, as suddenly as it began, she was still, silent, motionless. Samuel's hands trembled as he reached for her, but she was gone, disappeared, leaving behind only her shoes neatly aligned on the forest floor. The remaining students staggered back, horrified. The fog thickened again, masking the retreat of the figures. The token fell to ground, harmless now, a simple piece of wood carved with alien symbols. The forest returned to a deceptive calm. The faint crackle of the dying campfire was the only sound. Naomi's fingers shook as she picked up the token. The symbol seemed to shift, subtly, impossible to trace, impossible to forget. Emily leaned close, whispering, "It wasn't just her. They're marking us. All of us. And if we resist next time, it's permanent." Samuel's jaw clenched. "We need a plan. We can't just wait to be taken." Brian's hands hovered over his camera, torn. "We can't even record this. Nothing works. Nothing. It's like the forest itself erases proof." Emily suddenly stopped, staring at the tree line. I saw something," she whispered, voice shaking. "A clearing farther in. A place they call the sanctuary." Naomi swallowed hard. Sanctuary? That's where they've been taking them. Emily nodded slowly. Yes, the ones who disappear first. They're offerings to something. Silence fell over the group. The forest seemed to exhale, patient, knowing, alive. The weight of what they had just witnessed settled, like a stone in their chests. The realization was impossible to ignore. This was no longer a forest. This was a prison, a waiting place, and their freedom was an illusion. They huddled together, trembling, but the token burned faintly in Naomi's hands, a reminder that they had been chosen. that the forest, the figures, the unseen force beyond comprehension, had singled them out, and they would not relent. Samuel's voice broke the quiet. Tomorrow, we go after the sanctuary. We need answers. We need to know what they want and why. Naomi looked at the others, fear and defiance battling in her eyes. Or we die trying. The fog deepened, swallowing their camp. Somewhere in the distance, the faintest whisper of movement, like the shifting of many limbs, like the breathing of the forest itself, reminded them they were being watched. Every step, every thought, every heartbeat. And deep in the shadows of Blackthorn Hollow, something older than memory waited, patient, deliberate, and hungry. The forest seemed to tighten around them, each step deeper into the unknown, accompanied by the creaking of ancient trees and the whisper of wind that sounded almost like voices. Naomi led the way, clutching the carved wooden token as if it were a lifeline. The rest of the group followed in silence, each footstep heavy with dread. Every glance over the shoulder accompanied by the gnawing suspicion that someone was following them. Emily paused frequently, staring at the ground, tracing faint patterns pressed into the moss and dirt. "They've been here," she whispered. "They marked the path. Every chosen leaves a trace, even if you can't see it at first." Samuel's jaw was tight, his body tense. "We're too deep," he said. "There's no way to turn back without inviting them to notice. We have to keep moving." Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost all meaning. The forest canopy thickened, blotting out the sky. Fog pressed close to the ground, curling around their ankles like living serpents. Their breaths were ragged, and each heartbeat felt like a drum announcing their trespass. Then, just as their hope was waning, they stumbled into a clearing. The air shifted. It was different here. Heavy, charged, as though the very molecules were humming with anticipation. The sanctuary stretched before them, carved naturally into the forest, yet undeniably structured. Stone pillars, weathered and moss-covered, rose in the ground in an irregular circle. The trees formed a jagged perimeter, enclosing the clearing as if protecting it from the rest of the world. Naomi's eyes widened. This is it. The drawings, it's exactly like my sketches. In the center of the circle, something caught their eyes. A massive, circular pit dug into the earth, lined with crude stones, its interior dark and foreboding. At its edge, faint remnants of ash and scorched earth told of countless fires. Naomi swallowed hard. They've been here before many times. Brian, usually quick with a sarcastic remark, could only stare. It's like they're waiting. Emily stepped forward cautiously. The chosen they're kept here, and those who resist. Her voice faltered, but the implication was clear. They don't leave. Suddenly, movement along the perimeter snapped their attention to the trees. Faceless figures emerged silently, dozens of them now, robes blending into shadows, each holding a faintly glowing object, tokens identical to the one Naomi carried. They did not advance aggressively. They simply watched, waiting, their collective presence suffocating. Samuel took a protective step in front of the group. "We're not here to fight. We just want to know why. Tell us what this is." His voice carried a mixture of fear and defiance. One figure detached from the rest, walking slowly to the edge of the pit. It raised its arms, and for a moment, the forest fell into complete silence. Then it spoke, not with words, but in thoughts, clear and cold, echoing in the minds of the students. "You come, you see, you understand, and yet you do not comprehend." Naomi's knees buckled. What do you want from us?" The figure tilted its head. "From the beginning, you were chosen to witness, to endure, to carry the truth. Some of you will leave, others will remain." Emily's hand trembled. What truth? What are they doing here? Why the sacrifices? The figure's presence shifted, almost imperceptibly, and the air around the pit seemed to ripple. The world beyond this forest decayed. Civilization eroded. We maintain the balance. We cleanse, we choose, we preserve. Your peers, they were not lost. They were prepared. Naomi's stomach turned. Prepared for what? The figure pointed toward the pit. Suddenly, the ground shook and the fog lifted briefly to reveal shapes within, motionless forms, wrapped in shadows, arranged with precision that made Naomi's stomach knot. Tokens lined the edges, faintly glowing, each symbol corresponding to the sketches she had made. She recognized faces, though decayed, frozen in expressions of terror and awe. Her heart twisted. They're still here. Samuel clenched his fists. No, this isn't right. We have to leave. We can't stay. A voice echoed, one that wasn't entirely in the air, but in their minds, insistent, commanding. None may leave until the chosen speaks. The token in Naomi's hand glowed intensely, blinding for a moment, and images flooded her vision, memories not her own. She saw Jared Fields escape, the night he fled, the terror he endured, the helpless faces of his classmates. She saw the moments before each offering, the trembling, the fear, the resignation. And then a face, not faceless, appeared. A man tall, shadowed, but unmistakable, orchestrating the rituals, controlling the chosen. The full horror hit her. This was no longer about supernatural forces alone. This was a human puppeteer manipulating a cult, using fear and ritual to enforce obedience. Emily gasped. It's someone behind them. Someone alive. Someone human. The figure at the pit moved closer. You perceive the veil. You see the hand behind the mask. And now you must choose. Will you step forward, bear witness, or be taken? Samuel grabbed Naomi and Emily. We're leaving. Now. No token, no reason, nothing. We move. But the forest had other plans. The fog thickened violently, and branches lashed out as if alive, blocking their path. Tokens floated in midair, forming a barrier of light and shadow. The whispers escalated into a chorus, taunting, pressing, overwhelming. Each step toward the exit was met with resistance, the forest itself bending, guiding, forcing them toward the pit. Naomi fell to her knees, the tokens slipping from her hands. Images continued to pour into her mind. Rituals, sacrifices, the chosen being conditioned for something beyond comprehension. A voice, Jared's voice, nearly lost of time, whispered, "Beware the orchestrator. He waits, always waiting." They were trapped, the circle closing, fear clawing at the edges of sanity. The pit yawned before them, deeper than the eye could see, shadows writhing within. And then, for the first time, a clear human laugh echoed from the edge of the clearing, crisp, intelligent, terrifyingly calm. A man emerged from the trees, tall, thin, eyes sharp and calculating, observing the chosen with meticulous detachment. "You've come far," he said, voice smooth, deliberate, "but you see only fragments. The story is far darker than you imagine, and by the time you understand it, you may be too late." The forest exhaled around them, waiting, patient, eternal. The orchestrator smiled faintly, and for the first time Naomi, Samuel, Emily, and Brian understood. They were not merely witnesses. They were participants. And the next chapter of the forest story was about to begin. The clearing felt alive, oppressive, as though every shadow had teeth. Naomi, Emily, Samuel, and Brian stood in a tight cluster, their breaths short, hearts hammering against ribs that suddenly felt too fragile to contain them. The orchestrator, tall, skeletal, a specter of human cunning, paced the edge of the pit like a predator toying with prey. His eyes glimmered with knowledge that transcended decades, as though he had anticipated every step, every hesitation, every heartbeat. "You've seen only the surface," he said, voice smooth, detached, but with a weight that made it impossible to ignore. "You think you understand? You have no idea." Naomi swallowed hard, the token still clutched in her trembling hand. Its glow was dim now, flickering like a candle in a storm. Why are you doing this? What do you gain?" The orchestrator stopped pacing, tilting his head. A smile ghosted across his lips. "Gain? My dear, this is not about gain. This is about purpose. The world outside has long been lost to chaos. Here, we maintain order. We choose who rises and who falls." Emily's voice shook, though she tried to steady it with reason. "These are kids. You've trapped kids for decades. That's insane. That's murder." "Insane? Perhaps," he said, gesturing to the pit. "But order requires sacrifice. Control requires compliance. And you You've stumbled into my story. Brian stepped forward, trying to hide the shaking of his hands. What about them? The chosen? The ones already gone? What happens to them? The orchestrator's eyes darkened, narrowing like twin daggers. Gone? No, they serve a greater purpose. They are the foundation of what comes next, each one meticulously conditioned, each one vital. Naomi's stomach twisted, while rising. She glanced at Emily and Brian. Samuel's jaw was tight, his hands clenched into fists, knuckles white. You're lying. This is all a lie. They didn't agree to this. They couldn't have. There's no way they wanted this. The orchestrator's laugh was cold, deliberate. Ah! But they did agree, in the only way that matters. They agreed when they were powerless, when fear stripped them of free will, when hope became the illusion I controlled. Consent is irrelevant when the mind is mine to mold. Naomi's mind reeled. She saw flashes of Jared Field's memories, the whispered commands, the slow erosion of independence, the fear that paralyzed the body and mind. She realized, with a sickening certainty, that the orchestrator's reach went beyond the forest. He had prepared everything meticulously, ensuring that no one could leave untouched, that even escape carried the weight of observation, that even freedom was a carefully constructed mirage. Suddenly, the orchestrator snapped his fingers. Tokens on the edge of the pit levitated, forming a wall of blinding light. The group stumbled backward, shielding their eyes. Whispers surged, a tide of voices layered with warning, accusation, and something darker, anticipation. You are unprepared, the orchestrator said, the whispering chorus echoing his words. But you will learn, or you'll be added to the tapestry. Emily fell to her knees, shaking. I don't want to be part of your tapestry. We're human. We're real. You can't control us forever. The orchestrator's gaze fixed on her. Control? No. This is about inevitability. You were born into a story that began long before you, and it will end long after. You are here because the forest demands it, because the order demands it, because I demand it. Naomi felt the token vibrate violently in her palm. Light burst from it, illuminating the clearing, revealing shadows she hadn't noticed before. Figures in the trees, eyes gleaming, waiting, watching. The chosen, she whispered. They're everywhere. You're not alone. The orchestrator's smile widened. Precisely. And now that you see, you must decide. Will you submit to understanding, or will you challenge it? Samuel's hands were trembling. Challenge it? We can't. Look at them. The forest itself, it's alive. It protects him, protects the order. Brian's eyes darted around. We have to get out. We can't stay here, not another second. Maybe if we split up. Naomi cut him off, her voice a sharp whisper. No, we'll die if we split. We stick together, or we don't make it all. The orchestrator's laughter rose, merging with a chorus of whispers. Ah, the human instinct for unity. Admirable but naive. You'll discover soon enough that unity is tested in fire, and even fire can be cold. From the pit, shadows began to stir. Naomi froze. She could see vague outlines, figures in robes, bodies suspended as if mid-motion, faces hidden but somehow familiar. Her mind screamed, those are my classmates. They're alive. Emily gasped, clutching Naomi's arm. No, they can't be. They how? The orchestrator's tone dropped, a knife of calm cutting through the chaos. Alive? Some survive. Some endure. But survival is not escape. They are still here, bound to the forest, to me, to the order. And now you will face the same choice. Suddenly, Naomi remembered Jared Field's warning. Beware the orchestrator. He waits, always waiting. Her heart raced as the magnitude of the situation crashed over her. They were not merely witnesses. They were now actors in a story that had been written long before their arrival. Samuel stepped forward, voice resolute despite the fear shaking him to the core. We won't play your game. We won't let you manipulate us like the others. Whatever you've done, whatever power you have, we'll find a way to stop it. The orchestrator's eyes narrowed, a predatory glint emerging. Bravery or foolishness. Often they're the same thing. But choice is an illusion, isn't it? Observe, learn, survive if you can. The forest watches. The order endures. And soon, the final act begins. The shadows surge, the pit breathing like a living entity. Naomi, Emily, Samuel, and Brian realized with cold horror there was no simple escape. Every step, every decision would bring them closer to the orchestrator's truth or to their own destruction. And in that moment, they understood the forest's cruel lesson. The story wasn't about them leaving alive. It was about them understanding the depth of what had been hidden for decades and surviving long enough to witness the orchestrator's game unfold. The forest seemed to close in around Naomi, Emily, Samuel, and Brian. Every snap of a twig, every whisper wind to the pines, carried a weight they could feel pressing against their chests. The orchestrator's laughter, distant yet omnipresent, had faded into the shadows, but its echo lingered like smoke, tainting every thought, every step. Naomi led the group through the underbrush, heart hammering. Her hand clutched the token tightly, its faint glow pulsing in time with her fear. The forest floor was uneven, littered with roots that threatened to trip them at every turn. The oppressive humidity mixed with the scent of decay and moss, filling their lungs with heaviness that made movement almost painful. "We need a split," Samuel said abruptly, voice tight, brittle. "We can't keep moving together. It's too obvious. He'll anticipate us if we stay together." Naomi shook her head violently. "No, if we split, he'll pick us off one by one. We're stronger together." Emily's voice quivered. "Naomi's right. We've already seen what happens when we think we can outsmart him. He's always 2 steps ahead." Brian's eyes darted nervously. "But we need a plan. The clearing, the pit, it's not just a trap. It's a control mechanism. He's watching, always watching. There has to be a weakness." They moved cautiously, every snap of a twig making them flinch. The forest seemed alive, aware, bending to some unseen will. Naomi's mind drifted to the stories Jared Fields had told, how the chosen were conditioned, monitored, and punished. She couldn't shake the memory of the pit, the robed figures, and the faces she had recognized among the shadows. Suddenly, a rustling behind them made them spin around. Emily screamed, stumbling backward, but Samuel's hand shot out, steadying her. A figure emerged, limping through the undergrowth. At first, Naomi thought it was another of the orchestrator's puppets, but as the figure came closer, her breath caught. It was Jared Fields. His eyes were hollow, sunken, yet sharp, carrying a weight of knowledge and horror that made Naomi's stomach twist. "I warned you," he said, voice hoarse, trembling. "You don't understand the full scope. Not yet. He's everywhere. The forest isn't just a trap. It's a network. He controls paths. He monitors movement. He bends perception. You can't fight him directly." Naomi's voice broke. "Then what do we do? How do we survive?" Jared shook his head, glancing at the trees as if the branches themselves were listening. "You survive by dividing, by distraction, by exploiting the one thing he cannot control, trust. But even that," his eyes flickered to Brian, "even that is fragile." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Trust had already been tested, frayed, and strained. Every decision they had made, every hesitation, had been manipulated. And now, Jared's arrival offered a glimmer of hope, but also a reminder of just how precarious their situation was. Suddenly, a low hum resonated through the forest. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew steadily, vibrating through the soil and into their bones. Naomi felt a shiver run down her spine. "What is that?" she whispered. Jared's eyes widened in recognition. "He's here. The orchestrator knows we're moving. He's converging, listening, watching, predicting. We have minutes, maybe seconds. You have to move, now." Branches tore at their clothing as they sprinted through the dense undergrowth. Naomi's lungs burned. Her legs screamed in protest, but adrenaline surged, propelling her forward. Emily stumbled, but Samuel caught her, pulling her along. Brian brought up the rear, scanning the forest for movement. Ahead, the terrain dropped sharply into a narrow ravine, barely visible through the thick fog. "This way!" Naomi yelled, leading them toward the slope. It was dangerous, but offered cover a chance to hide, even if only temporarily. As they descended, Naomi's mind reeled. Every memory of the orchestrator, every terrifying moment in the clearing, replayed in her mind. The pit, the robed figures, the whispered commands. They weren't just threats. They were tools, mechanisms of control. And now, with Jared by their side, a fragment of the past and a key to survival, they had confront not just the orchestrator, but the very forest itself. Suddenly, Emily tripped on a root and fell, sending the token skittering down the slope. Naomi lunged, catching it just before it fell into a dark crevice. The glow flickered brightly in her hand, a beacon in the suffocating gloom. "Careful with that," Jared warned, voice urgent. "It's more than a token, it's a link. It connects him to the forest, to the chosen, to everything he controls. Lose it, and we lose our leverage." Naomi nodded, pressing the token close to her chest. The group moved in silence, the forest closing in, oppressive and omnipotent. Every shadow could hide a predator, every sound a warning. They were trapped in a living maze, and every decision could mean life or death. Minutes stretched into hours. The forest seemed endless, a labyrinth designed to confuse, disorient, and exhaust them. But finally, they emerged into a small clearing, moonlight cutting to the canopy in silver slashes. For a brief moment, they allowed themselves to breathe, hearts still pounding, bodies trembling. Jared knelt, scanning the area. This is a temporary haven. He'll know we're here soon. You need to make a choice. Stay and hide, or move toward the heart of the forest. The deeper we go, the greater the risk, but also the only chance for answers. Naomi's hand tightened on the token. She glanced at Emily, Samuel, and Brian, their faces pale and drawn but determined. "We go," she said, voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "We find the truth. We end this. Or at least we try." The group moved forward, shadows stretching long across the forest floor, the hum growing louder, vibrating in time with their racing hearts. Every step carried them deeper into the orchestrator's domain, and every heartbeat reminded them survival would demand courage, cunning, and sacrifice unlike anything they had ever imagined. As they disappeared into the dense foliage, the forest seemed to shift around them, guiding them, manipulating them, testing them. And somewhere beyond sight and sound, the orchestrator watched, waited, and smiled. The final confrontation was approaching, and nothing in the forest, nothing in their lives, would ever be the same. The forest had grown still, unnaturally still, as Naomi, Emily, Samuel, Brian, and Jared pressed deeper into its heart. The moonlight, now filtered through layers of twisted branches, cast distorted shadows across the uneven ground. Every footstep seemed amplified, every breath loud, echoing as though the trees themselves were listening. The hum that had haunted them for hours was gone, replaced by an oppressive silence that weighed on their chests. Naomi's grip on the token was iron tight, the faint glow illuminating the fear etched into each of their faces. "We're close," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "I can feel it." Jared shook his head slowly, eyes darting nervously to the shadows. "Close doesn't mean safe. You need to understand, he's more than just a man. He's the architect of this forest. He's been shaping it, controlling it, feeding off fear for decades. And now he knows you're here." They approached a clearing unlike any they had seen before. The ground was unnaturally bare, devoid of the moss and roots that had marked the forest paths. In the center stood a structure, more ancient than any cabin or building they had imagined. Wood and stone twisted into shapes that defied logic. Symbols were carved into every surface, circles interlocking with lines that seemed to shift when looked at from different angles. Smoke curled lazily from a central fire pit, though no flame was visible. The orchestrator appeared suddenly, stepping from the shadows as though the forest itself had given him form. He was tall, robed, mask glinting in the dim light, eyes invisible behind the carved visage. His presence radiated control, and Naomi felt her knees weaken. "You've come far," he said, voice smooth, resonant. "Far enough to learn, far enough to test. But you are not ready." Jared stepped forward, token raised, his face pale but resolute. "We've been ready since the day you took them. We've been planning, surviving, and we will stop you. You won't control anyone else." The orchestrator's mask tilted, a gesture that was almost curious. Control? No. I guide. I shape. You call it control, because you are weak. You cannot understand the patterns, the purpose. These children, your friends, they were chosen to fulfill a destiny, to transcend their ordinary lives. And you, he gestured to Naomi and the others, you will either follow or be consumed. Emily's hands trembled, clutching her sketchbook. She had been silent for hours, but now she spoke, voice clear despite the fear. You lied to them. You hurt them. You're not transcending anything. You're just afraid of being forgotten like the rest of us. The orchestrator laughed, a sound that seemed to ripple through the very ground. Afraid? Perhaps. But fear is what shapes greatness. Fear is what makes the chosen survive. Samuel stepped forward, anger coiling in his chest. You don't get to decide who survives, who lives, who dies. The forest reacted. Trees swayed violently, branches snapping like thunder. Shadows stretched toward them, as if eager to obey the orchestrator. Naomi could feel the forest trying to engulf them, to erase them from existence. But she held the token higher, and the glow pushed back against the encroaching darkness. This ends now, Naomi said, voice unwavering. We're not afraid of you anymore, and we're not letting you take anyone else. The orchestrator tilted his head, mask glinting, then suddenly lunged toward the group. The world seemed to slow. Naomi felt the air split with energy, the token flaring like a star in her palm. Jared stepped beside her, chanting something under his breath, a memory of what had been taught to him during his years in hiding, a piece of ancient knowledge scribbled in one of Emily's sketches. The glow from the token pulsed violently, and the ground beneath the orchestrator cracked as if the forest itself were rebelling. A deafening roar filled the clearing. Branches bent violently, carving circles in the air. Shadows shrieked, writhing against the light. The orchestrator staggered, mask cracking along the edges. Naomi and the others pressed forward, moving as one, their fear replaced by something harder, resolve. Brian grabbed Emily's hand. Together, he said. They formed a circle around the token, linking hands, hearts racing. Energy surged from them, fueled by grief, love, and rage, pushing against the orchestrator's presence. For the first time, he faltered, his form flickering, shadows splitting like broken glass. And then silence. The clearing was still. The robed figure was gone, vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. The oppressive weight lifted, and the forest seemed almost ordinary, though the scars of what had happened remained. The token dimmed, finally settling into a soft glow, no longer pulsing violently, but warm and steady. Jared fell to his knees, gasping. Naomi and Emily collapsed beside him, trembling but alive. Samuel and Brian embraced each other, tears streaking their faces. The forest had tested them, tried to break them, but they had endured. Naomi looked around the clearing, the carvings and symbols still etched into the stones. It's over, she whispered, though she knew the forest would never truly forget. It's finally over. For the first time in years, they allowed themselves to feel relief, a fragile, shimmering light that cut through the trauma of what had been endured. But even in that moment of respite, Naomi knew something had changed forever. The forest had witnessed their defiance, and though the orchestrator had been defeated, the memory of his control, the knowledge of the horrors within, would linger. Always. Weeks later, the survivors returned to the village. The media frenzy was subdued now, replaced with quiet whispers and cautious relief. Families reunited, mourning finally mingling with the joy of recovery. Jared Fields disappeared once again, this time leaving a note for Naomi and the others. Keep living. Remember what we endured. Never forget them. Naomi kept the token, a reminder of their ordeal and their victory. Emily began to draw again, her sketches now full of light and hope rather than terror. Samuel and Brian found solace in rebuilding, in reconnecting with the lives that had been threatened but survived. And yet, in the forest beneath the shadows and the moss, the whispers never fully ceased. Some nights, Naomi swore she could hear the faintest hum, a reminder that the orchestrator had been more than one man, more than a figure in robes. The forest itself had been complicit, alive, a silent witness to humanity's darkest impulses. But the survivors had emerged, scarred, shaken, but unbroken. And in their unity, in their courage and defiance, they had carved a path through darkness, one that no orchestrator, no forest, no fear could ever completely erase. As Naomi stared at the horizon, the sun rising over the trees, she whispered into the wind, "We survived. We'll never be silent again." And for the first time in decades, the forest seemed to exhale,